Hello, my name is Zay Rodas. Today I'm going to be doing my presentation about media representation and Chicano identity and how media shapes perception and power, and pretty much just how it represents Chicano communities, especially in America, even outside. So, media shapes how people see and judge others. So, a lot of the time when somebody's watching a movie, they get these stereotypes in their heads, not even like realizing it because that's what the movie is showing them. And it kind of forms a habit, and then people will kind of like form this idea about a person, a community, an ethnicity. So that kind of is what I want to go into today with this presentation, and kind of how it affects, it'll lead the effects to the problems that have occurred in the past in history. So in Hollywood and movies, it's not very neutral. It's heavily influenced by power, and whoever runs the movies, those are the people that have power. So I chose this topic, because I believe it connects with identity and culture and inequality. And I think those are all very true and important values, especially when taking this course. I think those are very important topics. And there's really a lot to go, which is fun. So basically, but it more shapes it. So, what is media representation? Media representation is how groups are portrayed in media. It shapes perception of identity and culture. And often the main way people learn about groups is through media representation. So these groups can be like the bandidos, the cholos, those kind of things, or like housemaids they usually show in these kind of movies. And this really shapes public perception, like I said, is because that's all they see on the screen. And there's a lot of now famous actors and characters that a lot of people know that are Chicanos or other Hispanic ethnicities, cultures through these roles. And it really influences people's identity and the power in film. And it really is just how people perceive us, the Hispanics, Chicanos. So the problem are stereotypes. So what's the most common problem? It'll be stereotypes. So, like I said, these are going to be criminal or gang related. You'll see like the guys with like in the gangs, like the headbands, those kind of things. Even though you might see those still today, it kind of like makes everybody like have those racist stereotypes that are like, all Hispanics are like that, and it can influence stuff like that, which is obviously not good. Or only immigrants, so nobody was actually born here and everybody's immigrating here, which is a super big problem today, that whole idea. And that they're poor. A lot of movies will show that, like housemaids, or landscapers, stuff like that. It focuses more on the poverty aspect than rather like the people who are like innovative, all that stuff, which is also something that kind of we dove into in the chapters in class. It's very one-dimensional, so it's perceived one way, and they really ignore the real complexity of this issue. So why stereotypes matter and why they exist is it's media shaped by a dominant or white power structures. So most of Hollywood is ran by white people, especially in the past, in the early 90s. And that didn't change until the 1960s or 1970s, when more Chicano films came out and all those movements started. So it really simplifies stories, especially the Hollywood movies, for mass audiences. So the bigger crowds, the bigger movies, the bigger sales are more for like the mass audience. It's not really targeted for Chicanos or anybody like that. It's just really for the sale, which is very greedy, more the greedy reasons. And it reinforces existing hierarchies. And basically, the people that tell the stories shape how those stories look. So the writers, the directors, all that, they're the ones that are in control. And most of the time, the people who are in control are not Chicanos. Or not for the good cause, which is something, sort of like those independent Chicano films are more about, is not as much sales, but more of the message. So why are stereotypes so harmful? That's something I'm going to dive into, but I want to talk about the case study Mi Familia. That was a movie that we kind of talked about in class and was in the book. So it's a multi-generational story, focuses on more of the family and culture. The story focuses more on the family's side, like the Chicano family's side of it, kind of tells their like lives, their lifestyle, and how they have complex identities too. So why are stereotypes so harmful? Well, they shape public opinion, they influence policy, identity, and self-image. Pretty much the representation has real world consequences. As we can see here, there is the protest right here, which basically it just shows everyday life that they have been going through and what they've been fighting for, and really highlights the resilience and that there's just multiple perspectives, not just one. What I want to talk about now is that who controls the media. So the people that control the media are going to be, like I said, those white people, the directors, the makers of Hollywood, and whose stories get told. Most of the time, it's going to be focusing on the protagonist. And a lot of the movies that we do see are the Chicanos being like the gangsters, the sidekicks. Why that matters is a lot that we see today is that we kind of see that these roles kind of translate to reality, and a lot of people will face the consequences by these stereotypes by just like it translating to reality, and they can face that racism. An example I kind of wanted to throw in here is this is famous singer Fuerza Regida. Well, he doesn't really show up more on like the film side of things. He does influence music heavily. He is Chicano. He's Mexican, but he was born. He's more of like the immigrant side. His family is very Hispanic, but one thing I do want to bring up is that he makes a lot of popular music in Mexico and all around the world, really, just for the whole like Hispanic side of media in general. But he kind of faces that identity problem where he is balancing between both worlds. Like I recently went to Mexico talking to this one doctor, and he was saying that when we were talking about music, he said that he's not really like fully Mexican, and he's kind of makes like more like white Mexican like rap music, which I kind of found interesting because I think his like it's kind of ties back to that, like they don't know, like they're like kind of 50-50, like are they, they don't really belong in either side. So, and kind of like relating to that, like the more voices, more accurate stories. I think as an influencer, they definitely have a bigger impact, especially when it comes to those stereotypes. Like this guy, by being a top Latino singer in the world, he definitely says something about those stereotypes. So media still shapes beliefs, which is really important. And I think it's changed a lot recently. Well, we see bigger artists come up, and representation affects real lives. So to conclude, but this cool mural, I thought it was really cool because it shows the kind of American side on the left, and then it shows the mother and the Chicanos on the right, and it kind of shows how they balance both worlds, like I was talking about earlier. And then basically last is that my conclusion, I think media shapes reality, stereotypes limit understanding, and representation is power. So media shapes identity, basically meaning that what we see on TV, music, podcasts, all that these days, that's what a lot of people will hear. It just takes one video to go viral, one song to go popular, and everybody will be thinking the same thing. Definitely heavily influenced. Stereotypes limit understanding, so it's important for people to recognize and get different sources from different places to have a better understanding. And representation is power, meaning that how these groups are represented is all up to who's in power. Thank you.